Hey you, and welcome. In this video, we will learn about promises in JavaScript. Promises are very handy when we're working with something that goes to a different server and spends X amount of time and comes back with a request. That X amount of time, we have to wait for that request to come back and do some business logic with it after the fact. And that's where promises really come in handy. There's a documentation for that in the Firefox. I have it open right now. Is in the MDN promises, and we can read all about them. Is basically what I just said in a diagram form, where a promise goes to some other service and waits for fulfillment. When the fulfillment happens, then it comes back to the service and then gives you the response. And that's what we're gonna try and work with. And this is the syntax for promises as well. So let's go back to my code. I'll show you what this means. So I have the index.html, same as the last one. I kept the mouse down, key up as is, and the index.js is empty right now, and the browser doesn't have any content except for just the bullet points. All right, so first things first, let's just keep a variable for key up and mouse down so I don't have to write too much code. So let's do mouse down document.query selector, get the mouse down ID element, and same thing, let's copy paste this, same thing for key up, get that as well. Perfect. Let me just move it a little bit. Great. So we have those two. Now let's call a setup function that doesn't exist just yet. And let's create that setup function as a const arrow function. And this function will target, mouse down, inner HTML equals to something like so. And then key up will be else. Great, perfect. So our code is working, setup function is working, and I'm able to render stuff on my DOM. Now, what happens if I add some kind of a delay in my timeout? There's something called a set timeout in JavaScript. That's a global function. It's available. It's basically to mimic some kind of delay in your script. So now we can do that. It requires two arguments. First argument would be a predicate, a function, and the second argument would be milliseconds. How many milliseconds do you want it to wait before the function should be executed? So what I'll do, set timeout. I'll just call a predicate here, and in the parentheses, I'll say mouse down should be set to nothing after 2 seconds, so 2000. That should take 2 seconds for it to change the something to nothing. Let's go ahead and save that. Great. So you notice how something else shows up and then nothing changes 2 seconds after. And the reason why that's happening is because the JavaScript goes top down. So it just executes set timeout, but it doesn't set timeout, waits for 2 seconds to execute, but then key up else happens right away. What we want to do is wait for 2 seconds here and also make the inner HTML for else wait as well, so that the execution happens properly rather than skipping through and then now we have to worry about what happens 2 seconds later. So that's where promises come in handy. First things first, we have to change our setup to an async function. That's not really the prerequisites for promises. You can start working with promises even without async. There's other methods to do it. But when we work with React framework, we will be working with async await a lot. So this is the right way to just go right ahead and start working with async await. So to make a function async, all you got to do is just put async keyword at the beginning. If this is an arrow function, that's how you do it. If this was a function expression like this, you have to put async before the function keyword. That would work as well. All right, so that's async function now. Next, I will start by writing a new promise. Just like date, promise is an object, so it's a class, and I can instantiate that by calling new promise. In the first parameter, you have to provide it again, a predicate, a function, and in the function, we will get two arguments, resolve and reject. I will only work with resolve in this case, and resolve is a callback function that we can call when we are done with the execution of that function. So let me show you what I mean. I will accept resolve as a callback function, and in my function, I will move set timeout up, and set timeout has another function inside it that does the mouse down set to nothing. Once that is done, I will call the resolve like this. Perfect. So far so good. Nothing should change at this point because I'm not waiting for it. So if I save it, same thing should happen. Something else shows up and it changes to nothing else afterwards, right? Now let's see what happens if I was to put await at the beginning of new promise. And if I save it, notice that something shows up and else shows up only after nothing else happens. So that's where async await is very handy. You can make a request to the server and then wait for the server to come back with the object that you're looking for and then do the rest of your logic. All right, perfect. Those are promises. I'll see you all in the next video.